Welcome to this second video in the series. I'm going to break down my program and talk a little bit about how I structure my workouts and some of the exercises I do. The program I'm running for the time being is based on 531, which is a program created by a former powerlifter called Jim Wendler. And I came across it on the website T-Nation, but actually it was originally an ebook which Jim Wendler sold online. The basic idea is that you train either 3 or 4 days a week. I train at least 4 days a week with one workout for each of the main lifts: squat, bench press, deadlift, and overhead press. This program requires you to identify what's called a training maximum or training max, and usually Wendler recommends that you take your 1 rep max and then take 90% of it to ensure you're not overestimating your training max and being governed by your ego. So let's have a look at the general structure. So we've got 4 weeks per cycle, and in the first week for each of these 4 workouts you are going to do a set of 5 reps at 65% of your training max, and then you're going to do a set at 75%, and then the last set, and this is key to the program, you're going to do 5 reps, but then the plus indicates you do as many reps as possible while maintaining good form. You don't have to go for them, it's optional, but it's good practice to always try to go for as many reps as possible if you can. If you start with a reasonable training max for each of the 4 lifts, you will find that you'll be doing, possibly 12 to 13 reps that first week if you really push it. The benefit of starting relatively light, that is to say, calculating these percentages from a training max, which is only 90% of your true 1 rep max, is that since you add weight every cycle, every 4 weeks, you'll actually extend the amount of time you can add weight without stalling. Anyway, in the second week, you do these 4 lifts again, only this time you do triples. So your main sets are 70% 3 reps, 80% 3 reps, 90%, so heavier weight than the set of 5 the previous week, for 3 reps plus. So you do as many reps as possible, hopefully hitting 3, of course. So the first week you might get 7 or 8. Then week 3, the weights go up again, but you do a set of 5 at 75%, a set of 3 at 85%, and a set of 1 plus at 95%. Usually first week you'll be hitting 3 to 5 reps on that, possibly more. Week 4 is called the deload week. You reduce the intensity, so the weight you're lifting, and then just do sets of 5. Now, this is the first modification I make. I only do the deload week once every 3 cycles. So I will do cycle 1, I'll do weeks 1 to 3, then cycle 2, weeks 1 to 3, and then I'll do cycle 3, weeks 1 to 4. Okay, so deload every 3 cycles. The reason for this is primarily personal. I don't believe, or I don't feel at the moment, I need to deload every 3 weeks. It's as simple as that. If I start to stall, or if I feel I'm starting to be overtrained, then I will introduce deloading more as and when I feel it's necessary. Which again speaks to the importance of tracking what you're doing. Just one last thing before I continue. Assistance work means extra lifts after the main lift of the day. Say I'm doing a squat workout, which support the squat. So you might do things like front squats, leg press, some deadlifting. Wendler, in the official 531 ebook, there are a number of different approaches he puts forward. I use one of them, which is called the boring but big protocol, which has you doing 5 sets of 10 of the main lift at a lighter weight after these main sets. However, I don't do that every workout, and I add my own assistance, as we're going to see on the next slide. I've already spoken about this first modification, deload only every 3 cycles. I add extra sets after the main 5-3-1 sets in the main lift. So perhaps sometimes heavy triples or doubles, sometimes partial movements. I might talk a little bit about that later on. Not every workout, but sometimes I will add some sets on. The assistance that I do after the main lift, sometimes I do the boring but big 5x10 of the main lift or a very similar lift, just to increase volume and make the muscles do more work. The reason it's called boring but big is because working in the 10 rep range airs more on the side of hypertrophy than pure strength. I often use the rep target method for assistance. So for instance, if I was doing a front squat to support the squat, I might choose a weight, 70 kilograms, and then what the 3/25 means is that I would do 3 sets and my rep target would be 25 reps. In every set, I would try to do as many reps as I could with good form. If I thought I was going to fail the next one, I'd stop. So I might then get 1 set of 12 and then 1 set of 10, which would bring me to 22 reps. And then I might get 1 set of 7, which would then bring me to 29, which surpasses the 25 rep target, which would mean next time I did the front squat as assistance, I would then put the weight up to 75 kilograms and so on. And for smaller muscle groups, I might not do the 3 sets of 25 reps. I might just do 3 sets of 15 with a fairly light weight. So for exercising things like the side delts or the rear delts, I would use a relatively light weight just to get a pump and get some blood moving into the muscle. That will also have a hypertrophy effect as well. So that's it for modifications to 5-3-1. Jim Wendler always says on the T Nation website that if you modify 5-3-1, then it's not 5-3-1 anymore. So I suppose what I'd call my program is a custom program which uses the 5-3-1 set structure for the main lift, and then I add assistance as I see fit for myself. Before we look at a workout in more detail, let's have a look at medium-term planning. So this is a sample of my spreadsheet. You can see these are my 3 cycle periods. So remember, I deload every 3 cycles. So I call these larger cycles mesocycles. And this table at the bottom, these are my training maxes. So I started in April. You can see the 27th of April is the start date of cycle 1. And in the squat, we had 130 kilograms, bench press 100, deadlift 150, and overhead press 60. So slightly less than what I could actually manage at that date. But you can see that after each cycle, I add 5 kilograms to the squat and deadlift and 2.5 kilograms to the bench press and overhead press training max. The table above is a table which for each week, week 1, week 2, and week 3, using the percentages in the table on the 5-3-1 slide, tells me what weights I'll be doing my 5 rep sets, my 3 rep sets in week 2, and then the 5-3 and the 1 rep sets in week 3 for all 4 of the lifts you can see up here. Okay, so this bit at the bottom is just for the boring but big assistance if I were to use that. I don't actually often use those numbers. I usually go by sort of feel, to be honest, with the assistance weights. So that's how I know, for instance, where roughly I'll be in November, December, because I know a cycle takes me approximately 3 weeks, maybe slightly shorter if I'm training more than 4 times a week, so I can have a fair idea of what I'm aiming for. The final thing I want to talk about on this slide is how I sequence my workouts. Now, up to this point, between the end of April and now, which is the 6th of June, I've been squatting and then resting a day, and then bench pressing, then resting a day, and then doing deadlift and overhead press workouts in succession on consecutive days, then having 2 days rest, then going back to squat. What I'm doing now is working out, then taking a rest day, working out, then taking a rest day. That cycle takes 8 days. So I'm at the moment not going Monday squat, Wednesday bench press, Friday deadlift, and so on. I'm having, my training days are changing every week. And am I 100% consistent with these patterns? No. But I'm going to try and stick with this one as far as possible until work gets in the way again. The benefit I feel of this one is that between squatting and deadlifting, I've got 3 rest days, and between bench pressing and overhead pressing, I've got 3 rest days, which just helps my recovery a little bit, particularly since my training maxes are going to be getting heavier over the course of the next month or 2. Next, I want to summarize the general structure of a workout. I first of all start by doing the 5-3-1 sets. So for instance, if I was on week 1, I'd be doing a set of 5 at 65%, a set of 5 at 75%, and then I'd be doing that 5+ set at 85% of my training max. If I felt good after that, say I got 8 reps, at least 8 reps on that last set, I might up the weight by 5% of the training max, then try another set of 5 as an extra, so that might be 90%. Do a set of 5. I might, if I feel great, do a triple at 95%. If I'm feeling particularly energetic on that day, I might, on rare occasions, work up to a near max single just to test out where my max might be. Although if I do 8 reps of a particular weight, say I did 8 reps of 90 kilograms, you can actually calculate from that, and this was really pushing it, like the maximum I could do at that weight. You can actually use an online calculator to tell you that that translates probably into a max of 112.5, I think, roughly. Anyway, after the main lift, I'll do assistance. Usually I do some assistance using compound movement. So if it's a squat day, I might do a front squat and a deadlift variation. These are both compound style movements. After the relatively heavy barbell work, I would move on to assistance using smaller weights, so perhaps dumbbells or plates, and sometimes the barbell still. So for instance, on a bench press day, I might do 3 sets of 15 of side raises with either dumbbells or a plate. And another example might be 3 times 20 of bicep curls, or biceps curl, I should say, with a relatively low weight. Usually with this assistance also comes a little bit of ab work, so I might do 3 sets of 20 of leg raises or sit-ups. So that's the assistance done. Then sometimes I'll do a finisher, so usually on a squat day, it will be either something like sled drags or pulls, or some 400 meter repeats on the track, something just to provide a little bit of conditioning work. The reason it's called a finisher should be clear. Let's look at 2 recent squat workouts from my log. So let's look at the left-hand one first. This is the first bit, the 5-3-1 sets. You can see that this was the set of 5, this was the set of 3, this was a set of 1 plus. I managed to get 5 reps, so then I put the weight up again, did another set of 5, and then a triple at heavier weight, just to challenge myself. They're highlighted green because they were rep records, certainly for this new training period that I'm in now. I then did Romanian deadlifts for 3 sets of 10, and then a couple of sets of 8. So I was aiming for 5 sets of 10, but the last 2 were, I felt my full form was starting to break, so they were just sets of 8. Then I did some other assistance, so higher rep work with the dip bar leg raise, and then some plank, both front and side. I sort of supersetted these, which means I did the leg raise, then I did the plank, and then had a rest, and then went back to the dip bar leg raise. This other workout on the right, this was a week 1, so this was a 1 set of 5, 1 set of 5, a 1 set of 5 plus. I got a 9. I decided not to do extra because that set of 9 at 127.5 I felt was enough. Notice that this is my warm-up up here before I get to the main sets. I just make that up. I usually do jumps in the squat, jumps of 20 kilos. Then I did front squat. I did 3 sets with a 25 rep target, which I met. I then did the Romanian deadlift. I completely smashed that 25 rep target. So I'll be going up to 85 on that the next time I do it, and up to 75 on the front squat. And doing the same thing. Then I did some, now this was unusual, hang power snatches and power snatches. I'm not really versed in the Olympic lifts, so I'm just trying to start practicing those now. I'm not going to explain what power snatch is. You can go and look that up. And a sled push. We've just purchased a sled. So I was pushing a weighted sled 30 meter on a 30 meter course out and back as a relay with one other person. And that took not very long at all, but it was incredibly knackering. There you go, 2 example squat workouts. Next, bench press. So, similar thing again, right hand workout first. We've got this, which is a 5-3-1 day. So this is a set of 5, this was a set of 3, this was a set of 1, but with the magical plus next to it, I managed to get 5. At which point I decided to throw in 2 more singles. I was playing with grip width and also just pausing on the chest before pushing back up with those 2 singles. I then did, you can see 6, I was aiming for 6 sets of 10 actually, at 72.5. And where I've put 3 grips here, I was doing 6 sets. First set, close grip, then normal grip, then wide grip, and then back to close grip. So I was sort of cycling the grips. I wrote down the number of reps I got in those last 4 sets because I didn't manage to get all 10. Then I did a barbell row for the 3 sets, 25 rep target, and managed to get that. So next time that's going up to 70. And then I decided as a back off to just do 20 reps with 40 kilograms on the barbell row. I left it at that partly because this workout was at about 10 p.m. at night, but also because you don't have to do isolation assistance all the time. Okay, it's useful if you feel like it, if you've got time, do it, but I was quite happy with that workout as it stood. This second workout, I decided to add in some shoulder mobility beforehand because my shoulders have been feeling the effects of heavy bench press training and overhead pressing in recent weeks. This was the 3 sets of 5, so week 1. So this was the 5+ set. I managed to get 8 reps, which I was fairly happy with. I would have hoped to get a little bit more, but you know, sometimes you aren't on 100% form. I then did my 6 sets of 8 this time actually. So this is actually the 3rd cycle I've been doing. In cycle 2, which this is the last workout of, I was doing aiming for 6 sets of 10. I decided to aim for 6 sets of 8 and put the weight up in cycle 3. So I managed to do with 3 grips. I should have added that in here. 3 grips again, close, medium and wide. I managed the 6 sets of 8 at 70. So I'll be putting that up to 72.5 in my next workout. Then I did a barbell row again. You can see that from here, 67.5, because I hit my 25 reps, I went up to 70. And in fact, I managed to hit 25 reps total again. So that'll be going up to 72.5. So you can see how I'm building progression in here. I then did a line triceps extension and a biceps curl in sequence. 3 sets, 25 rep targets. So those weights will be going up both to 37.5 kilograms. I quite like the fact that they're both the same in terms of balance. Then I did some isolation assistance for smaller muscle groups, the face pull, the delt raise, the rear delt raise, and actually I did some overhead squat, partly to help with my snatch technique and also just shoulder mobility again. So that was the sort of final lighter assistance. You see, 3 sets of 15. So again, just to illustrate, I will either do 5 or 6 sets of 10 and then perhaps in subsequent cycles reduce the number of reps but up the weight. So that's an increase in intensity but a decrease in volume, and then go back to the 5 sets of 10 in the next mesocycle. I like this rep target method. At the moment I'm doing a 25 rep target for the 3 sets, but I can change that up. I could push it higher, up to 30, 35, or lower depending on what I want my emphasis to be. You could of course do a 5 set alternative. You just need to push the number of reps up. While I'm here, I might as well talk about my most used assistance exercises for each of the 4 lifts. So let's start with the squat. I would say I use the front squat, the box squat, the Romanian deadlift, just the normal deadlift, most of all. For the bench press, I use the close grip bench press. Sometimes I'll do pin presses, so that's where you start with the bar on the pins and push from a dead stop. I also quite like my lying triceps extension. And you can never beat push-ups as well, just for increasing the volume that the chest and triceps are receiving. For the deadlift, I will do rack pulls, which are deadlifts from slightly higher, so you rest the bar on the pins and pull from slightly higher. You can handle higher weight, it overloads you a little bit. I also like doing power shrugs. That builds the traps and the upper back. And also I do box squats or variations of squats on the deadlift day as well. Finally, overhead press. I tend to use the bench press again, or some variation of it, the close grip bench press on the overhead press day. Now, that's only part of my assistance. I've not really mentioned any back isolation exercises. I mean, if you think about it, most of these work the back that I've written already, like the squatting, the deadlifting, the rack pulls and power shrugs. But I also do lots of barbell rows. I do use dumbbells as well, but the last few weeks I've only really had access to a barbell. So barbell rows of various types. There are at least 3 variations which I use. Also things like face pulls and rear delt raises for the upper back, and more shrugs just for the traps. The other thing that I quite like for the back are hyperextensions, using a hyperextension bench. For the spinal erectors, the lower back, and of course pull-ups, which you can add weight to using a weight belt. Another good one for the bench press, by the way, is the dip. I've not been doing that recently just because of shoulder issues, but the dip is another fantastic one, parallel bar dip with added weight. Anyway, talking of the back, not all muscle groups are created equal. Larger muscle groups, things like the back and the legs, can deal with a higher volume and load. And in fact, I train my back in some way every single workout. I do some kind of row, for instance, every workout, just because the back can take a lot of pounding and recover. For something like the deltoids or the biceps, which are small, I would only work those twice a week maximum and keep the load relatively low and the rep range relatively low as well. You do not want to be overloading small muscle groups with high weights. It's a recipe for injury. What you want to do is make them a little bit bigger, hypertrophy, so that they can act as supporting muscles to support the main movers when you're doing things like squatting, bench pressing, deadlifting, and so on. Obviously, there's an element of personal preference and everyone's built differently, but that's a general point that's definitely worth considering. Let me say one thing about the back and also the core. Of course, the lower back, I would say, is part of the core, but obviously core includes your abs, like on the front, the rectus abdominis, and the obliques, and things like the serratus as well. But these can be worked probably every workout to some degree. Squatting and deadlifting works both anyway, but I add isolation in. Certainly for the core, I do it every squat and deadlift workout. I work the back almost every workout. I think it's quite often neglected amongst people who are starting out in strength training. The back is involved in all 4 of the lifts, obviously in the deadlift and squat, but also to some extent in the bench press and overhead press in terms of creating stability. The upper back in particular is something you need to work on if you want to have a strong upper body. And that doesn't just mean, by the way, the lats. You've also got the traps and the rear delts, which all form part of that band of muscle that's behind your shoulders at the top of your body. The upper back is not just lats. Everyone is obsessed with doing lat pull downs and pull-ups, which are great. Pull-ups are one of the best exercises, but you can't neglect these 2. What's my plan for 2020? Well, at the moment, let me tell you where I'm at. So I'm about 91 kilograms body weight. My 4 lifts, if I had to estimate what my absolute 1 rep maxes would be, at the moment I would estimate about 165 to 170, bench press 110 to 115, deadlift 180 to 190, overhead press 70 to 75 probably. By the end of the year, I would like my weight to have increased. I'd probably be happy with 93 at the same body fat level. I would quite like my squat to be up near the 190 level. Possibly I'd be ecstatic if I got to 200. Bench press, I'm aiming for 125. That's going to be difficult to reach. Deadlift, I'm going to aim for 210, possibly 220. And for the overhead press, I'll be happy with 85. Okay, so these targets are going to require me to put on weight and train hard consistently. I can't emphasize that enough. So I'm sure at some point in the future we'll see if what I'm doing is actually working, and I'll try to do some progress updates just for a bit of fun. Thanks for listening. I hope that was somewhat interesting and perhaps useful.